The first thing you should know is this didn't start with a threat or a knock on the door or anything dramatic like that. It started with a fence, a rotting, sagging fence on a piece of land I hadn't seen in over a decade, and two men who thought a uniform was enough to make me fold. I was out there on a Friday afternoon, sleeves rolled up, hands dirty, trying to remember how my grandfather used to do things. 47 acres in the foothills, old oak trees, dry grass, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring if you stand still too long. This land had been in my family since before anyone thought it was valuable for anything except stubbornness and bad soil. My grandfather, Harold Quinn, lived here alone until he passed 3 weeks earlier, 90 years old, died in his sleep. No drama. No hospital, just gone. I hadn't even decided yet if I was going to keep the place. I work in cybersecurity. I live in Sacramento. My life is screens and meetings and coffee cups with lids. This was supposed to be a short trip. Fix what was falling apart, take stock, decide whether to sell or not. That was it. I was wrestling a fence post out of the ground when I heard tires on gravel. I remember thinking it was probably a neighbor, maybe someone coming to introduce themselves, maybe even bring condolences. That's what people do in places like this. Instead, a black SUV rolled up and stopped right at the gate like it owned the road. The kind of SUV that looks official if you don't look too hard. Two men got out. Dark blue shirts, black pants, utility belts heavy with gear, radios clipped on like props in a low-budget cop show. One of them was tall, shaved head, walked like he wanted the ground to know who was in charge. The other stayed half a step behind, thick neck, quiet eyes. The tall one raised his hand like a crossing guard. HOA Security Enforcement. That's exactly how he said it. Slow, confident, like I was supposed to recognize the title and immediately feel smaller. He told me I needed to stop all activity on the property. Said there had been reports, violations, unauthorized work. I looked at him, then at the fence post in my hands, then back at him. I remember thinking this was either a joke or a misunderstanding that would clear up in about 10 seconds. I told him I was just fixing a fence. He didn't blink, didn't even look at the fence. He reached into a folder and handed me a piece of paper like he was serving papers in a courthouse hallway. Citation, $500. Due in 14 days. The paper felt wrong the second I touched it. Cheap, plain, no watermark, no seal. In my job, documents matter. Authentic ones have weight to them, not just physically, but in how they're put together. This felt like something printed 5 minutes ago at a copy shop. I glanced at his uniform. No badge number, no name tag, just a patch that said security enforcement like that explained everything. I asked which HOA he represented. Sierra Valley Community Association. I nodded like that meant something to me, even though my grandfather had never mentioned an HOA in his life. The land was unincorporated, rural, the kind of place where people mostly mind their own business. The man smiled thin and tight. "You new here," he said. "Your grandfather had a hard time understanding how things work too." That's when my stomach tightened. I asked him what he meant by that. He didn't answer, just tucked the folder under his arm and turned back toward the SUV. The other guy followed without a word. No radio chatter, no call-ins, no urgency, just gravel crunching under tires as they drove off. I stood there holding a fake-looking citation on land my grandfather had owned longer than these men had probably been alive. That night, I didn't pay the fine. I didn't even tear it up. I sat on the kitchen counter and stared at it while the house creaked around me the way old houses do. I kept hearing his voice in my head, not angry, not scared, just certain. Harold didn't scare easy. Over the next few days, things escalated fast. Another citation appeared taped to my gate one morning. No sound, no tracks, just there like it had grown overnight. This one was for $750. Failure to maintain property standards. For the same fence I had just repaired. The SUV started showing up on the road. Not always stopping, sometimes just rolling past slow enough to make sure I saw it. Sometimes parked with the engine off, windows dark, watching. That's when I stopped thinking this was about rules. This was pressure. On the 5th day, my neighbor came by. Her name was Lillian Moore. 72 years old, barely 5 feet tall, sharp eyes, carried a pie like she'd done it her whole life. She'd known my grandfather for decades. We sat on the porch, eating pie, watching the sun slide down behind the trees. She told me about offers. Men in suits. Big promises. My grandfather always said no. After he started saying no, she said that's when those men started coming around. She called them frauds. Said Harold used that exact word. That was the moment everything clicked into place for me. Because pretending to be something you're not, that's my entire career. And whoever these men were, they had picked the wrong person to intimidate. That night after Lillian left, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was scared, not exactly, but because once your brain locks onto a pattern, you can't unsee it. Every little detail from the past week lined itself up in a way that finally made sense. And I realized something that made my chest feel both cold and calm at the same time. These guys weren't enforcing rules. They were manufacturing fear. The next morning, I started doing what I always do when something feels off. I verified. Not emotionally, not instinctively, but methodically. I pulled up the county records. No HOA with enforcement authority cover my land. I searched business registrations. Nothing matching Sierra Valley Community Association with any power to fine or lien property. I found a bare-bones website that looked like it was built in an afternoon, vague language, stock photos, names that didn't link to anything real. Then I called the number listed for the board president. A man answered, friendly, slightly confused. His name was Daniel Reyes. He'd been president of the HOA for almost 12 years, and according to him, the HOA handled exactly two things: road maintenance and shared well access. That was it. No security division, no officers, no citations, no fines. When I told him about the uniforms, the citations, the threats of liens, he went quiet for a long second. Then he said something that sealed it. Your grandfather warned me about something like this a while back. Said people were pretending to represent us. That call ended any doubt I had left. This wasn't overzealous enforcement. This was impersonation, fraud, extortion, and it was deliberate. That same afternoon, I got another call. Blocked number. Calm male voice. Professional. Told me my outstanding balance had reached $1,200, and if payment wasn't received within 7 days, they would begin lien proceedings on my property. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten directly. He didn't have to. He relied on the assumption that I didn't know better. I hung up, replayed the recording, and smiled a little. Because now I had proof. Over the next few days, I stopped reacting and started preparing. I set up cameras. Not obvious ones, but clean angles covering the driveway, the gate, the road. I backed everything up to the cloud. I documented every call, every appearance of the SUV, every citation taped to my gate like a warning label. Then the tall one came back. The one who liked to smile without warmth. This time, he didn't wear the uniform. Just khakis and a polo shirt, like a friendly neighbor stopping by unannounced. He leaned against the porch rail like we were having a casual conversation. He said his name was Ethan Blake. He said there was a company interested in my land. Cash offer. Fast close. No complications. $200,000. I almost laughed. The assessed value alone was more than double that, and that didn't even touch what was under the surface. I told him as much. He nodded like he expected that answer. Then he started talking about complications, about fines, about enforcement actions, about how some properties just weren't worth the headache. He mentioned my grandfather again, said he'd been stubborn, said he'd made things harder than they needed to be. That's when the tone shifted, because buried under the polite phrasing was a message meant to land heavy. Resistance has consequences. I told him I'd spoken to the actual HOA president. Told him there was no enforcement division, no authority, no ability to place liens. For just a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. His eyes flicked away, then back. Then he smiled again, thinner than before. Layers of governance, he said. Things the volunteer board isn't always aware of. It was nonsense, designed to sound official without meaning anything. I told him I wasn't selling. I told him not to return to my property. I told him any further contact would go through my attorney. That's when he leaned in slightly and said something that changed everything. Your grandfather thought he could resist too. Look how that turned out. He didn't say it loud. He didn't say it angrily. He said it like an observation. I watched him walk back to the SUV with my phone recording in my pocket, my hand steady my mind already racing ahead. He hadn't threatened me directly. He didn't have to. He wanted me to fill in the blanks myself. That night, I didn't feel afraid. I felt focused. The next day, I drove into the city and met with an attorney named Rachel Coleman. She specialized in property disputes and fraud cases. I laid everything out on her desk. Citations, photos, audio, video, timeline. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she leaned back and exhaled slowly. "What you're describing is felony impersonation and attempted extortion," she said. "Multiple counts." She also said something else that stuck with me. "This isn't about you personally. It's about the land." She pulled up a geological survey from a county database I hadn't known existed. 3 years old, quietly conducted. It showed mineral potential beneath my property. Gold, not the romantic kind you pan for in a river, but enough to make extraction profitable with modern methods. That was the missing piece. My grandfather hadn't been harassed because he was difficult. He'd been targeted because he was in the way. Rachel gave me 2 options. We could call the sheriff immediately and have the men arrested, or we could wait. Let them escalate. Let them document their own crimes. Build a case big enough to reach whoever was paying them. I chose to wait. That weekend, I found what my grandfather had been preparing. In the back of his workshop, behind old tools and dust, was a metal lockbox. Inside were years of notes, photos of unfamiliar vehicles, copies of fake citations identical to mine, dates, times, names. He had known. He had documented everything. He just never got the chance to finish it. On Monday, under Rachel's guidance, I sent a certified letter. Formal, calm, precise. I rejected all authority claimed by the so-called enforcement group. I warned them that any further entry onto my property would be treated as trespassing. I copied the HOA president and the county sheriff. The response was silence. For 2 days. Then on the 3rd day, the SUV came back. This time with company. 3 vehicles. 3 men. Full uniforms. Clipboards. Confidence. They stood on the public road and shouted that my property would be placed under lien within 48 hours. I didn't respond. I let the cameras record. I let them talk. That night, Lillian called me again. Said they'd been telling neighbors I was contaminating groundwater. Environmental violations. Dangerous landowner. Defamation. Rachel wasn't upset when I told her. She was almost pleased. "Every lie is another charge," she said. "Let them keep going." The next morning, I called the county sheriff directly. He listened, carefully, calmly. He told me they had enough to act already, but he understood the bigger picture. He promised deputies would be nearby. That evening, I sat on the porch watching the sun dip low, the land quiet again for a moment. Somewhere out there, Ethan Blake was planning his next move, convinced I'd crack eventually. He had no idea how much evidence was waiting for him. And when he came back, he didn't come alone. They came back on a Sunday morning, right when the light was soft and the air was still, like they wanted the setting to feel peaceful while they did something ugly. I was sitting on the porch with a mug of coffee, half listening to the birds, half watching the road the way I'd learned to do without realizing it. 3 vehicles pulled up in a slow line. The black SUV in front, a white pickup behind it, then a silver sedan bringing up the rear. They parked right at the gate like they were staging something. The tall one stepped out first, back in uniform now, chest out, clipboard in hand, like the last few weeks hadn't happened. His partner followed, same silent muscle routine. A 3rd man climbed out of the pickup, younger, jittery, adjusting his belt too much, eyes darting like he already regretted being there. I checked my phone. Cameras live. Audio recording. Cloud sync confirmed. I sent 1 text. "They're here. On my property." The reply came back faster than I expected. "Député en route. 8 minutes. Do not engage physically." The tall one pushed the gate open and walked right in, like the certified letter had never existed. Like boundaries were just suggestions. He stopped about 20 feet from the porch. "We're here to execute a lien on this property," he announced. "You have 5 minutes to collect your personal belongings before we secure the premises." He held up a piece of paper like it was sacred. I took a sip of my coffee. Let the silence stretch. "What court issued that order?" I asked. He hesitated. "Just long enough. That information is confidential." I shook my head slowly. Court orders are public record. What's the case number? He glanced at his partner, then back at me. You're wasting time. I stood up, pulled my phone out openly this time, and held it where they could see. I'm recording. You've entered my property after receiving written notice not to. I'm asking you to leave. Now. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Lillian had come down the road with her phone raised, recording everything, her jaw set in a way I hadn't seen before. A few seconds later, a pickup pulled in behind the convoy, and Daniel Reyes stepped out, HOA president, clipboard of his own in hand, looking angrier than I thought a man like him could look. These men do not represent our association, Daniel called out. We have no enforcement division, no authority to issue liens. This is fraud. The tall one spun toward him, the confidence cracking at the edges. This is a separate enforcement body. You don't have oversight. Daniel laughed, sharp and humorless. I've been president for 12 years. There's no separate body. You're trespassing. That's when the sirens cut through the air. 2 sheriff's vehicles rolled up, lights flashing, but no urgency in their movement. Calm, controlled. Real authority has a way of not needing to rush. The sheriff stepped out, tall, gray at the temples, eyes taking everything in at once. He asked one question. What's going on? I explained. Slowly, clearly. No emotion. He turned to the tall one. Let me see that court order. The paper changed hands. The sheriff studied it for a moment, then longer. He looked up. This is no seal. No case number. No judge's signature. This isn't a court order. The younger guy took a step back. I didn't know, he blurted out. He told me it was legit. The tall one opened his mouth to speak, and the sheriff cut him off. You're under arrest for criminal impersonation, attempted extortion, and trespassing. The cuffs came out. The sound was quieter than I expected. The silent muscle didn't resist. The younger guy talked nonstop. Names, dates, who paid him, everything. As they were led away, the tall one looked at me one last time. No ismite, no confidence. Just the hollow look of someone who had finally run out of leverage. The case moved faster than I thought it would. Turns out when you hand prosecutors years of documentation, clean recordings, witnesses, and a cooperating accomplice, things tend to fall into place. The company behind it all surfaced within weeks. A land acquisition firm tied to mineral rights, using pressure tactics to force sales below value. Federal investigators got involved. More victims came forward. My grandfather's files became part of the evidence. His handwriting, his notes, his quiet refusal to give up. The man who led it all went to prison. Others settled. The company dissolved. 3 months later, a mining firm offered me more money than I'd ever seen in one place, just for the rights under the land. I thought about it for a day. Then I said no, because standing on that porch afterward, watching the light move through the trees, I understood something my grandfather had always known. Some things aren't valuable because of what's underneath them. They're valuable because of what they teach you when someone tries to take them. A uniform doesn't make authority real. Confidence doesn't make truth. And fear only works if you don't stop to ask questions. So here's what I want to know from you. If someone showed up at your door tomorrow wearing confidence like armor and told you they had power over your life, your home, your land, would you believe them? Or would you verify? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one.